So let's talk about some uncomfortable things. Let's talk about drug addiction. Let's talk about molestation. Let's talk about these things that, in hopes of reaching somebody that is struggling with this, and or family that has someone struggling with this, and they have no idea what to do with their addicted loved one. They have no idea, and they're just stuck with the question of why is my loved one addicted? Why is my loved one behaving this way? And, for me, I'm very grateful today that I was a bottomed out, crack addicted opiate addict. I'm extremely grateful for that. I don't regret what happened in my life. I don't regret that, because as a result, today I walk around a free man. I walk around awake most days instead of walking around asleep dreaming I'm awake. And a lot of people are walking around asleep dreaming they're awake, because 1 in 6, as statistics show, 1 in 6 kids have adverse childhood experiences. And that's, a traumatic event, neglect, abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, watching trauma, experiencing trauma. And when you're a kid and you're in developmental stages, you can't really fight or flight, and you can't soothe, so you shut down and you numb out and you tune out. And that's what's happening to a lot of the population, a very large number of the population. And then for me, the first time that I got high, I'm not counting experimenting with alcohol from the family liquor cabinet when I was 10. As I was watching the grown-ups do that and looked like they were having a good time. So, I experimented. Everybody does that, I believe. Everybody. The time that I remember where the drug became my solution, and I didn't realize it then at the time, but looking back, I do now, is like I was 12 years old. I was in my grandparents' Christmas tree farm. My grandpa had a Christmas tree farm, and I was with my cousins, and somebody pulled out a joint. And when I smoked that joint, sure, I laughed and had a great time, and I was eating Cheetos, I remember that. And I had cheese all over my face and my eyes bloodshot and just giggling and laughing. But internally, what it did to me is it was like taking a big sigh of relief. Like I felt a part of, I felt connected, I felt liked, I felt like I belonged, I felt respected. And I wanted more of that. I wanted to do that again, and I wanted to do it again and again and again. And why it made me feel that way is because before that day, I didn't feel like I really amounted to much. I didn't feel like that I was liked. I felt like that if you really knew the real me, that you wouldn't like me. I felt defected. I felt like something was wrong with me. I felt really small. I never wanted to be who I was. I didn't like being in my shoes. I didn't like where I was planted. I always wanted to be somewhere else. I always wanted to be someone else. I always wanted to be older than I was. But when I smoked that joint for that first time, and it worked. Now before that, I'll say, I've smoked I smoked an old homegrown leaf joint, and I didn't do a damn thing, anything at all except burn my throat. But this time it worked. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. And, so I was feeling that way beforehand because, for one, I started when I was a kid, right? When I was 5, from the time I could talk until I think I was about 7, 8, it's blurry. About 7 or 8, I stuttered. And I never talk about that in my story, and I never think about it a lot. Because I could go to my mom and she could soothe me, and she would calm me. And I felt supported, and I felt, that someone had my back. And it was obvious that I stuttered and I knew that everyone knew that I stuttered. So it was pretty easy for me to talk about it. Now it impacted me. It certainly didn't help the self-esteem when you're walking around going ta 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 ta, which I did, and I'd get picked on about it. But she took me to a speech therapist, and she got that straightened out real quick. I mean, once I went to speech therapy, it worked. Now I'll stumble on a word or two every now and again, but for the most part, it doesn't impact my life today. But what really sent a hammer to the head was when I was 10 years old. And again, I think I was 10. It was around that age I was molested. And, I'm 10 years old. And I don't know how everyone else is. I think most kids at 10 years old are pretty selfish and self-centered. And I didn't think about, hey, what the hell's wrong with them? Or how could they do that? Or this is very wrong and I must do something about this. I must tell the authorities. None of that even was in the picture. I internalized that, like, what's wrong with me? Like, why couldn't I have stopped that? Sam, you must not be a real man. And that's when the first mistaken belief was formed that impacted a large part of my life, was this mistaken belief of I've got to prove myself a man, that I'm not a real man. Because a real man would not have let someone molest him. Christ, I was 10 years old. There's no way I could have stopped that. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't flee it. It happened. And I remember afterwards, I just remember walking around going, and excuse my language when I say this, but it's just what was going through my head. Yeah, even at 10 years old and all the way through, was like, man, what the fuck? Man, what the fuck? What the fuck? How could I let this happen to me? How could this happen to me? How damaged am I? How worthless am I that I can allow this to happen? Real men don't let this happen. So from the time I was 10 years old or thereabout until I sobered up at 36, I walked around this world as a stage character. I walked around this world and walked around thinking, what is wrong with me? And I've got to be a man. And I've got to prove to the world that I'm a man. So I would fight at the drop of a hat, because I believe that's what real men do, right? Real men fight, because I didn't fight during the molestation. So, I'm not feeling like a man. So real men fight. I'm an outdoor guy, right? I was raised in a rural area and always had the toughest jobs. I worked in tobacco from a young age, and that's not easy work. I framed houses during the summer, worked in construction during the summer when I was on break from school. When I turned 18, I went into the family logging business. I loved running equipment and being in the woods, and logging at that time was the second most dangerous job in the world. And if you want anything that's gonna make you feel like a man, that's the job to get. And then from there, I went and worked offshore. I mean, man, that's a manly job, right? Real men work offshore. And I was running equipment, and when I would hunt, I'd have to have the biggest guns. And when my vehicles, I had to have the biggest trucks, and always a truck. And I never felt comfortable dressing up. I never felt comfortable in a suit, because that didn't match the stage character that I had to portray to the rest of the world, to keep you from knowing who the real me is. This weak kid that couldn't stop somebody from molesting them. So that certainly was a very impactful event that formed some belief systems and really put me to sleep. Instead of walking around awake, it put me to sleep, and I became this stage character. Was not my authentic self. I struggled with relationships. I went from girlfriend to girlfriend to girlfriend to girlfriend, was never faithful during that time, never. And, was smoking weed and drinking and having a good, I had to be like the wild one, I had to show that I was valid, that I was something, that I was somebody. Look at me, look at me, look at me. I really am somebody, y'all. I'm somebody. Don't see the real me. see this part of me. And as my addiction progressed, it's not about like, hey, I just went to the harder stuff because that's what I got to do because I'm going to do this and that, and I'm going to smoke this and I'm going to snort that. It's that I couldn't cover up as fast as that internal destruction was building. And I just kept trying to push it down and these feelings that I had about myself that really weren't in my conscience. It was really in the subconscious of my being. And I'm only really aware of these things the longer that I'm sober and now that I've healed from it, to really identify what was really going on. So, fast forward, I'm my life is a complete wreck, a train wreck. And, I'm smoking crack. My outsides looked good for a while. I had the house, I had the business, I had the cars, I had the pretty wife, I had, some land. I was relatively good looking. To talk to me and hang out with me, you wouldn't really think anything was wrong. I was funny. I was able to put a smile on people's faces, and I was polite. But inside, I was a disaster. My outsides looked good, but my insides were trash, complete trash. And everyone in the community from my small town was like, "Man, what's wrong with that guy? What's wrong with that guy?" People distanced themselves from me, understandably. I drove people away. Hell, at the end, stray dogs wouldn't even want to be around me. Shit, dust wouldn't even settle around me, And I had a feeling of being completely alone. And I had a family that loved me. I still have a family that loves me, and our relationship is great today. But damn, if it sure wasn't strained during the last years of that addiction. And I know that a large part of their thought was, what the hell's wrong with Sam? And I'm sure that my mom, to some degree, was thinking, where did I go wrong? She didn't go wrong. I didn't have the ability at that time when those things happened to me to really express it in a healthy way, to be able to talk. Like, when you imagine a 10-year-old going to your mom saying, "Oh, hey mom, can I have a sippy cup, or not a sippy cup, a juice box and by the way, look, I was molested. This thing happened to me." Nah, that's not going to happen like that. And I went to treatment a couple times, or several times, just these 30-day programs. And, man, what I've noticed since I worked in the field of addiction treatment is that, treatment's not really cutting it these days. And I think that, years from now, we're going to look back on how we're treating addiction and know that we got a lot of shit wrong. We got a lot of shit wrong right now. We're calling it cutting edge, but I think that most of how addiction is being treated is incorrect. I would go to these 30-day treatment centers, and they would, talk about triggers, and they would talk about cravings, and they would talk about, change people, places, and things, which I have no clue how to do that. When you're telling me I'm like a week off a crack pipe, and gone through detox of opiates, which is no fun, of how to change people, places, and things. And we were talking about, war stories, and there was no time, and there is really no time in a 30-day program to detox, which is about 5 days, and then you're like a baby giraffe coming out of detox, barely able to walk, and then you're going to go in and do some deep therapy. Well, most of the time we're in group therapy, and most of the time they're talking about the substance and current situations with us. There's not enough time to get that individual, I believe, to a state where they're really willing and able to process and even touch and dig down and heal those experiences that happen to most addicted individuals. So I'd come out of treatment, and another thing, the family wasn't my family. They didn't know what the hell to do. They didn't know what to do with me. So they sent me to a place that they figured knew what to do with me. And I'd come out and I'd go back and do the same thing. And I didn't want to use. I didn't, when I was in treatment, I didn't want to pick up. When they're asking me when I'm in treatment, every single day they're asking me, am I having cravings? I'm like, nah, I'm not craving. I'm not craving. Nah, I don't want to see crack cocaine. No, that's what has me in this place. No, I don't want to do that. Absolutely not. I'm not craving. And they say, oh, well, that's good. And so when I'm having that dialogue with a clinician and they're asking me these questions and I'm answering them, I'm like, well, if I'm not having any cravings, I must be good to go. I must be ready to leave. I must be all well. And that's all my addiction needed to hear. That's all my mind needed to hear, because I wasn't craving, but I was obsessing. And it didn't look like pills. It didn't look like I was obsessing on smoking crack. It didn't look like I was obsessing to get some pills. It looked like, man, I got to get out of here and focus on my job. It means I got to get out of here and go and be a good husband. It means I got to hurry up and get out of here and just stay away from drugs and alcohol. I didn't even come close to the 2 30-day programs and the 90-day program that I went to. I didn't even come close to really digging down and treating what was driving addiction. Addiction is not my problem. It's the result of my problem. It's like, I don't know how many of you all would be able to relate to this or know what I'm talking about. It's like a dandelion in the yard. Your yard gets infested with dandelions, and you go out and you pull that yellow flower off of the dandelion, and you throw it away and think that you've done something to prevent the dandelion from coming back. That's bullshit. All the meat and all the health of the dandelions down in the damn root, and that thing's going to come right back. Well, that's the same thing with addiction. I go to a 30-day treatment program, and I'm not knocking 30-day treatment. I'm really not. It's just there's success means that the continuum of care. A 30-day treatment is just a start to get you to a place where you can come out and really do the deep work. I'd go in and they would talk about the top of the dandelion and not the root. Top of the dandelion being the addiction and the cocaine and the opiates and my current situation, and the root ball of that dandelion was really what was driving all that was trauma. And man, we don't deal with trauma very well. We don't really, it's kind of a new thing, I believe, to treat trauma, and I went to a place where they really dug down and got down to the root of what was driving my behaviors. Now, I had to be held accountable. I had to be shown the truth about my behaviors, because my behaviors became a habit because it worked. I was getting some payoff to it. It worked, and those behaviors, which were not productive, became a habit. And in order for that to change, I had to go through some heavy accountability. I had to be shown how my actions affect others. I had to be shown the truth about myself and about my behaviors. Doesn't mean that I was shamed about being an addicted individual or being molested or all the stuff that I did. It's about I was held accountable for my behaviors. So when I get into better, healthy behaviors, more of an awareness would come up to where I was willing to do something about the trauma that I had. And I got out of treatment, and my life today is completely different than what it was. But you get some years under your belt. Like I'm coming up on 13 years sober, and I think about 3 years into sobriety, I saw a therapist and had some more trauma work done. And then at 7 years sober, I had some more work done. Because things crop up. As they say, it's like peeling back the onion, but it is. It really is like that. It manifests. It's so ingrained in our life and in our makeup that, it's constant, not constant work, but it's, things are going to crop up. Now the question is, am I going to be awake enough to see it and do something about it? Or am I going to fall back asleep and walk around this world asleep dreaming I'm awake? Now I use daily disciplines to prevent myself from falling asleep to a large degree. I can still nod off on you, walk around here asleep dreaming I'm awake. But, there's a few daily disciplines that I do, and I stay connected to other people that are sober, that are on the same path as I am, to hold me accountable, to share my experiences, share their experiences with me. And what we can't do alone, we can do together. As I say, everyone is smarter than anyone. So that's been very helpful in my life. And I have a life today of freedom and abundance. And I don't have a private jet, I don't have a yacht, I don't have, I'm not living in a mansion, but I have freedom. Like I can be my authentic self. And I shared this on this video, which I don't know who will see it. I'm sure at least one person I don't know or have never seen will see it. And I don't care. I don't care who knows that I was molested. It has absolutely no power over me. And every single thing that I've gone through in my life, I've been able to help someone who is going through the exact same thing. So when things are happening to us and we feel like they're horrible, that they're just the worst thing ever, we really don't know. I was told a parable or a story of, the Chinese farmer who had a horse and a son. He was very, very poor, and he farmed, and he just lived in a little tiny village. And his horse ran off. Well, the villagers came up and said, "Oh, geez, man, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. How are you going to farm your land? It's the only thing you had. You can't farm your land. This is a disaster. It's the worst thing ever." He says, "Maybe. I don't know. Could be, could not be. I don't know." So a few days later, the horse came back, and it brought 10 other horses with it. And all of a sudden, this guy's like the richest farmer in the village and in the surrounding villages. And all the villagers come to him and say, "Man, this is the greatest day. This is the greatest thing ever. Oh my God, you're the richest man in the land. Best thing that could ever happen to you." The farmer stood there without any emotion and said, "Maybe, I don't know, could be, could not be." Well, his little adorable son went out and was tending to all these horses that they now have, prideful that they are now the richest family in the village. And one of these wild ass horses kicked him in the leg and broke his leg. Well, the villagers, they must be watching everything, because they came up and they're like, "Oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. This is a disaster. It's terrible. There's no one to tend to the horses." The dad said, "Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Could be, could not be." Well, a few days after that, the Chinese army came, conscripting young fighting age men to go fight in this war, in this battle that they were sure to lose. And guess who couldn't go? The kid with the broken leg. So the reason I say that I'm so grateful that I was an addicted individual is because now I realize through the work that I've done is that all of those experiences got me to the point to where I was really able to and willing to get down to the work that kept me asleep to this world, that kept me asleep to my authentic self. And then in turn, because I'm sharing these with others, and I'm blessed to be in a business and have a career where I can on the daily share my struggles in the past and how I overcame them with other suffering individuals. None of that was in vain. And that ain't a bad way to live. And that ain't a bad life at all. So I hope that this was helpful to somebody, you know. And that's about it, you know. I think that's plenty, you know. So y'all have a good evening.